Thanks for coming, everyone. It is good to see a well-attended meeting, and I think that does demonstrate that there is a viable future for the party as long as we can get through this current situation, and it is a bit of a sticky situation. And I'm afraid to say I do agree with some of the opinions that were expressed earlier. I think it was Ben who said that if Henry Bolton actually wins this EGM, I have to say I don't really see a viable future for UKIP. I don't really want to duplicate what's been said tonight. We've had some very good speakers. I probably can't match some of the speakers we've had for eloquence, so I'll try and amplify some of the points I think have emerged tonight. Richard, I'd like to also thank for organising this. It must have taken a lot of organising. It obviously mushroomed because it was originally Gloucestershire, the South West, and then it became West Midlands. People came along, and I think again that shows there is a wide interest in what's going to happen with this EGM, and that does again, as I said, demonstrate that a lot of people at the grassroots do still have a strong interest in UKIP and in the future of UKIP, so that's good. Richard went into a little bit as to why I'm here, because I'm from the other side of Offa's Dyke, so yeah, questions could be asked, what am I doing here? I'm from Wales, and luckily Richard explained I'm actually a member of the NEC. I'd like to slightly clarify my position. There are 12 directly elected members of the NEC. I'm not one of them, but the NEC did take a decision in November that, as well as having a representative from the European Parliament group, there would also be a representative from the Welsh Assembly group. So I do now sit as the representative of the Assembly group on the NEC. So the only relevance of that to tonight's meeting is that I was there when the decision was taken to take a vote of no confidence in Henry. So hopefully, if anything arises in the Q&A session as to what you want to know about the meeting and what was discussed and how Henry came across and all the rest of it, I think given the extraordinary situation that the party is in at the moment, I think I am at liberty to give you whatever information I can as to what happened at that NEC meeting. To go into what people have said tonight, sorry to be looking at notes, Bill kicked us off. He was talking about a lot of opportunities that could have resulted from the Brexit vote had we had good leadership at the head of the party, and I think he's right. There's been an extraordinary sequence of events since the referendum, which has given us a succession of different leaders. It's been, let's be honest, it's been a complete disaster for the party, really, what's happened since then. And we do need to still be strong on issues like taking control of immigration and our borders, taking back sovereignty and control over criminal justice. And I think another aspect that Bill perhaps didn't go into that strongly, although he touched on it with the he mentioned the Islamic issue, there's also an issue of opposing what we said at the conference in Torquay was cultural Marxism, what perhaps we know more commonly as political correctness. And I think that's the way ahead for the party beyond Brexit. We have to tackle political correctness, we have to stand up to it. That's the front line of politics for UKIP. And I think one of my disappointments with Henry Bolton is he doesn't really show much interest in pursuing that agenda. Of course, that isn't perhaps relevant to what we're talking about tonight, which is his fitness to be the leader. But I think these are all opportunities for UKIP to pursue if we had a credible leader. So the question that we have to address is Henry Bolton any longer a credible leader? Mark is, I know Mark, I've known him, I don't know Mark closely, but I do know him as someone who is a loyal party member, who turns up to by-elections and he campaigns, and he turns up to meetings as well. I mean, I've seen him as far afield as Stoke when we had the by-election campaign, and he then turned up in Cardiff when we had the leaders' debates for the general election. So Mark is a very active grassroots member, and I'm sure his heart's in the right place, and he's given a good account of himself tonight, and I'd like to thank him for coming as well. I don't on this occasion agree with him, but I think that we have to bear in mind that Mark's a very active campaigner, and we need people like him in the party, and he has every right to give his opinion on this issue. And of course it's right that we had a balanced set of opinions tonight, people from both sides. I think Ben Oh, sorry, Mark, the particular issues he raised, I think there were two pertinent issues. He was talking about Indigo. Now, I don't have any involvement with Indigo. I don't particularly know Bill. I've met Bill a couple of times. I don't have any particular closeness to Bill. I only met Ben for the first time tonight, and I haven't had any involvement in the Indigo group. So I don't have anything much to add about their activities. I think it's right that we have active people who can pursue their policy objectives. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, so I don't necessarily think there is anything sinister about Indigo, but I haven't been involved in their campaigns, so I'd just like to say I'm not a part of Indigo. The other issue that Mark raised was about Henry's CV, and he did appear to have a very good CV. And I think he appeared to be very strong on issues like security, our borders, the technicalities of Brexit and the immigration issue. And I think that would have made him a very strong leader, and he seemed to be a safe pair of hands. But unfortunately, there are now doubts about the veracity of his CV. So I don't think that we're in the same position with Henry Bolton as we were when he was elected. And I think the issue with Joe Marnie, yes, we shouldn't be too concerned about people's private lives up to a point, but the lack of truthfulness that has emerged, it does raise issues over his credibility, because it raises issues over his truthfulness. And if you don't actually have any trust in what somebody says, it will completely erode their effectiveness as a national leader, and that, I'm afraid, is just political reality. Who did we have then? We had we had the EGM, right, Rhys raised a lot of points. The issue of the EGM and the possibility of a conflation of issues, with Henry now making out that it's a stand of him against the NEC. But we have to go back to the issue that this is simply about the credibility of Henry Bolton as a national leader. He's dragged the NEC into it and issues over the reform of the NEC. But the point is, the NEC have themselves been exploring the issue of reform of the NEC since November. Henry Bolton has had nothing to do with that process, because he's had nothing to do with any policy issues since November. He's had nothing to do with any organisational reform since November, because since November he's been preoccupied with personal issues of his own, and since the revelations appeared in the national press, he's been preoccupied in appearing on TV shows talking about his relationship with Joe Marnie. That's become the dominant thing. And it's becoming increasingly impossible for him to get away from that and to divert attention onto what he should be talking about, which is Brexit, which is the future policies of UKIP, and also internal party reform, which he said he was going to be the focal point of his leadership. He's done absolutely nothing with internal reform. The common themes which have emerged from what other people have been saying, and I think Rhys spoke very eloquently about this, Out Now has completely flopped because he hasn't followed through on it. Save Our Services has completely flopped because Henry hasn't followed through on any of it. His treatment of the Young Independence movement has been a disaster, and he went from a position of saying that he was going to encourage UKIP to have a youth policy through appointing a YI leader as the national spokesman, and he's done absolutely nothing. And I think the characteristic of Henry Bolton's leadership is he's done very little. All he's done is he's had a good time in his private life, I'm sorry. He's also blamed, as I think Ben said, he's blamed everyone else for it. You know, it's Henry's own fault that he's dug himself into this position, but he's gone around blaming other people for it. He's blamed the NEC. The NEC didn't have anything to do with Henry jumping into bed with Joe Marnie. You know, it's ludicrous. Now, to go to the actual NEC meeting, there were quite a few people at that NEC meeting who went there as undecided people, or who people were broadly in support of Henry Bolton. What was astonishing to me was how badly Henry Bolton handled that meeting. He told us that he was generating a lot more press attention and media attention for UKIP, which I thought was staggering. My jaw dropped when he told us that. He said, "Oh, I've got lots more media bids for UKIP now," but the trouble is, he didn't seem to understand that all the media want to talk about is Joe Marnie, because they will use any excuse they can to drag down UKIP. They're not going to do the UKIP leader any favours. So my feeling is he's never going to get away from this issue, and he's never going to be credible as a party leader. But the very fact that he actually thought he was doing us a favour by generating more media, I thought was staggering and showed a complete lack of any political understanding. By the end of that meeting, even the undecided people, he'd lost the whole room. He told us that it was pointless the NEC bringing in a motion of no confidence against him because he had no confidence in the NEC. He told us that in his opening remarks. So I thought, well, if he doesn't have any confidence in the NEC, why does he think the NEC are going to support him after he said that? It did seem to show a lack of understanding of how committees actually work and how you actually run a political party. And I think overall what he's shown is a completely staggering level of incompetence, a lack of political judgment, and a complete lack of common sense. And if you really think such a person is fit to run a political party, well, it's no political party I want to be involved with. But thanks for coming. Yeah, thanks for the question, and it is a very valid question because since I've been in the Welsh Assembly group, we've had many sessions where we've said, why aren't people coming back to us? But it's not necessarily just Henry on that point. I would have to say a lot of the party spokesmen are not bringing Ernie into it. I've never tried to contact Ernie, so he's totally absolved. But a lot of the party spokesmen in the past, I've tried to contact. Now, as a little exercise, me and Crispin, who works for me, he's at the bar, when we had a new list of spokesmen and Henry had just been elected, I thought, as an experiment, let's email as many of them as we can and ask them about policy and see how many replies get back. Because at this point, I was very supportive of Henry's efforts to reform the party, so I thought, let's actually see how many of these spokesmen are actually playing ball. And I couldn't get email addresses for all of them, which is a drawback to start with. But we did manage to email 20 odd of them. The only emails I got back were from Peter Whittle and John Bickley, so it was a very poor response. So it has been a problem in the party generally of getting responses back, so it hasn't just been Henry. That has to massively improve. I just want to touch on the free speech issue that the previous questioner asked, because I think it does slightly relate to this. I was in a little bit of a pickle in December because I got banned from speaking in the Welsh Assembly because I did raise the issue of minority rights, and if we keep acceding to minority rights all of the time, they eventually begin to impinge on the rights of the majority. And I particularly raised the issue of the Gender Recognition Bill and rights for transgender people, sorry. And I was actually banned from speaking in the Welsh Assembly until I made a sort of apology, which I eventually did. It was a sort of half-hearted apology. But this does raise the very issue of free speech, which is massive, and it goes back to what I said earlier, that our political leverage in future is going to be from attacking political correctness, and that's what we have to do. And I think I did that. But the interesting thing is that I got a lot of supportive emails at the time from different people in the party as well, notably Gerard Batten, David Curtin. People like that got in touch and backed me up. I didn't get anything from Henry Bolton, and this was raised at the NEC meeting. One of the people who was sitting on the fence going into the NEC meeting, and possibly minded to support Henry, was a guy called Andrew Moncrief. And I'd never met Andrew before. I met him before the meeting, and he asked me about this issue in the Welsh Assembly, and I described the events to him, and I was still banned at the time. And he said, did you get any support from Henry over this? And I said, no, he never got in touch. So Andrew Moncrief raised that in the meeting, and he said to Henry, when we all went round the table and we had the chance to ask him questions, one of Andrew's questions was, when Gareth Bennett was banned in the Welsh Assembly, did you not see that as an opportunity to actually talk about political correctness and free speech? And that could have been an opportunity to take the press heat off yourself and change the issue and change the trajectory of what the media were talking about. And he said, did you see this as an opportunity for UKIP? Henry's reply, I wasn't fully aware of what was going on. So I'm afraid he was preoccupied with other things and he was totally ineffective on that issue, and that goes back to the issue of communication within the party. He was totally inept. Sorry about that. I'll be quick, but I'll be slightly less brief than Richard wanted me to be. Two names cropped up from discussions with the other NEC members as to who a possible interim leader might be. One was Margot Parker, who apparently isn't available to do it. The other one was Gerard Batten. I believe Gerard Batten is probably the best candidate to be the interim leader. As long-term, well, I back David Curtin, and I believe he's ready to run. And he will attack the issue. He will attack the issue of political correctness and free speech.